The airing of this program by this station is not an endorsement or recommendation by the station of the products or services discussed in the program. The station does not guarantee the results of any investments made by a listener to this program.
The Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush is sponsored by the Word on Wealth Radio Network.
This is the Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush of GQ Law. Gary is a San Diego financial solutions attorney, protecting people like you. The Word on Wealth team of financial experts is here to answer your questions and help preserve your family's financial future. Now, here's Gary.
You're live. Hey, happy Wednesday, everybody. Good to have you along. As you know, my listeners, my good friends and fans, Wednesday's a great day. It's a really great day for me every week because it's the day I get smarter about real estate, and I'm dead serious about that. I have Ken Pecus of the Pecus Group at eXp Realty, and he is my regular partner on our Wednesday shows. Ken, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here again.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the welcome. I'm happy to be here myself.
So good.
Well, I might be at the beach right now.
Well, you should be at the beach right now. It's a little chilly, but it's funny. Tomorrow,
I'm just going to pretend I'm there, but it's sunshine. I like it.
That's the thing. It's nice. It's a little cool, but the thing it's threatening. It was funny. I heard somebody the other day saying, well, but last summer it got really hot. And I said, stop talking, please. Just stop talking, because it's like, it's too cold right now because it's 54 degrees. And in the summer it gets up to, gosh, one day it got up to 86. Remember when they had that really hot streak? I just went, really? My gosh, go live in Arizona. In the summer it's 30 in it. In the summer it's 120, and in the winter it's 35. So yeah. Oh,
there we go.
Too funny. Anyway, there you go. Why are San Diego prices? And you guys today listening, we are talking about homes today, homes and all that kind of thing. And I had some really some intense questions for Ken today, and he's agreed to let me ask them right here live, and we will hear his answers live. A part of this is that I have a couple of kids that are buying real property. One just bought in Escondido, which we are so proud. Oh my gosh, we have a daughter that actually lives, not that I'm counting, but 12.6 miles and 17 minutes away from my home. The closest we've ever had a child living was 6.5 hours away. So this is super cool for us. It's very different. We love it. And then I have another son that actually is out of the state, and he's buying a home. And I had a really interesting conversation with him, actually several lately. And I said, you know what? I'm talking to Ken about this because he is my man. He is the man on this stuff. So we are going to talk about, things like, if we get towards the end, we want to talk about 1031 exchanges and things like that. But Ken, I would just love to have your opinion and basically give us kind of a lesson on leverage. Now, you guys, to get a hold of Ken, it's 619-977-8419. 619-977-8419. So let me, if it's okay, let me start out with that. What's happening is my son has saved up a lot of money. He's saved it up for quite a while. And he's looking for a house now that he's graduated. He's got his MBA. He's got a really great job, and he's looking for houses. So two things come up, and then I want you to comment. With both of my kids, they said we went and got pre-qualified. And we qualified for way more house than we can afford. And I thought that was a very interesting comment. And then, because I asked them about it, and they kind of explained, well, because, we don't really want to pay that much monthly, although the pre-qualification says we can afford easily much more than we're willing to pay. So I want Ken's comment on that. And then I want to talk about leverage, that putting these massive amounts of money down and trying not to borrow much money. So let's talk about those couple of things, if you don't mind, Ken.
Okay, perfect. So I think since you told me that you were going to ask me some kind of questions that way, I was kind of thinking about the best way to do this. And I have these conversations often, very often, surprisingly often, with potential buyers, clients, people that are just kind of pondering which way to go. So I think I'm a product of leverage. I saw it happen with my father and my mother. When they passed away owing maybe 3 times as much as they bought their property for. However, they passed on to us property that was easily 20, 25 times the equity position of what they owed on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw firsthand how leverage works, and I've kind of used that all my life. But I also understand, like your children and people that are like them, they didn't get to saving all their money and being in the position they are without being very conservative financially. So I totally appreciate what their concerns are. Here's what I would ask, and maybe we could go through a little bit of a conversation here, Gary, and I'll kind of go back to you, and I'll explain how I talk this out. All right.
Great.
All right. So number one, when somebody says that we qualify for way more than we can afford, they have to understand, first of all, the bank, you're using different words. It's all semantics, but it's different words. So maybe the word is not what you can afford, but the word is what you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're comfortable with then maybe draws down to what your lifestyle is like. Mm-hmm. So, but when it comes down to strictly afford, the bank is actually going to tell you what you can afford, because the bank is using actuarial tables. They're using history on people, and the bank does not want your house back. They don't want their house back. All they want is your payment on interest.
Okay.
When they might have security against your property, and they can foreclose on it if you didn't make it, but they don't want to foreclose. Banks do not want to foreclose on your property. Even if you had a lot of equity, they really don't want. They just want to keep getting your payments. So that said, the first thing you have to understand is, hey, congratulations, you can actually afford that. Whether you choose to afford it or not, it's up to you. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step. Then the next step is, so let's just talk about the payments and why you're uncomfortable. So I'll give you a scenario that happens to me all the time. Just use an easy number, okay? So let's say you want to buy a property for $1 million. Just picking that at random, okay? So sometimes I have people that they saved money, they've sold their other property. They could have $200,000 down, they could have $300,000, they could have $400,000 down.
2 minutes.
So just for grins, just for an example, I'm going to say the person has $350,000 down. So they want to go with $350,000 down, and so that means they're going to have a $650,000 loan. A $650,000 loan in today's days, I'm just going to use 5.5% interest, right? Mm-hmm. 5.5% interest is going to give them a monthly payment of, let's see, I'm just doing it right. I'm using the wrong number here. Excuse me.
It's okay.
There we go.
Okay, Ken Pecus, keep talking. Yeah, we're going to go.
Right.
So you've got about 1 minute, and then we're going to have to take a break and come back, but we're going to keep talking about this. So keep going on this. We're calculating now the payment, 5.5%, $650,000 loan approximately is
about a minute.
I actually don't have it.
Okay.
My computer screen just went off. So I'll get that number by the time we come back there, and then I'll roll on this thing.
Okay. So what we're going to do, what I asked Ken Pecus of the Pecus
I got him
group.
now.
Okay. He asked him for a number, and then what is the number? And then we're going to reemphasize that.
All right. The number is $3,690.
Okay. So we're talking about a mortgage payment like a $1 million home, $350,000 down, the loan is $615. We're coming up with the numbers, and we're talking about leverage. We're talking about home purchase. We're talking about home loans, how that all affects, because buying a home for somebody for the first time, sometimes it just freaks them out. There's, oh my gosh, there's a lot of debt, and that's a big payment. We're talking about that with Ken Pecus of the Pecus Group at eXp Realty. His number is 619-977-8419. Ken is an expert real estate professional. He has helped me personally. He's helped my family a lot, and I trust him. So we're going to be talking with him coming up in a couple minutes on this home purchase.
You've got questions. We've got answers. This is the Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush of GQ Law. Gary's here to give you peace of mind with expert estate planning, trust administration, inheritance, and probate. Call Gary to build, protect, and transfer your wealth. 855-500-TRUST. GQlaw.com. You're saving and investing for the future, and that's good. Have you ever stopped to think, where does my money actually go?
Gary, did you get that script from Tom?
Process that involves attorneys, judges, and sometimes contesting parties. And so we try to avoid probate at pretty much all costs. The way we do that is setting up living trusts, setting up properly documented wills, putting the property like houses, cars, bank accounts in that trust so that it avoids probate. Probate is only necessary if the estate plan isn't set up quite right. So we help them get it set up right. And mainly that's done through a properly created living trust.
Call Gary and the team at GQ Law, 855-500-TRUST, or go online and download Gary's free ebooks and videos. Read Gary's blogs. Call or click to request your free initial consultation. That's gqlaw.com, 855-500-TRUST.
Learn what it takes to achieve success and overcome adversity from those who've already done it.
Right. You're here on the Word on Wealth. This is Gary Quackenbush, and I am here with Ken Pecus of the Pecus Group at eXp Realty. Ken Pecus is our real estate expert. He's a friend. He's a personal financial or real estate consultant, and we have him on the show as our partner. So we're asking Ken some of the questions we're asking. I'm talking to him about buying a home, and specifically like a first-time home buyer is getting a little panicky, like, whoa, the bank says I can afford that much money, but I can't afford that much money. And we're kind of comparing that. So now Ken's giving us an example, Ken Pecus, and he says, example, $1 million home, 350 down, just making up these numbers. The loan would be 650,000 at today's rates ish, 5.5%. The payment would be $3,690 a month. All right. Take it from there, Ken.
All right. So, and just qualify that. That's not property taxes or insurance. That's just the principal and interest to the bank.
Right.
So $3,690 would be the payment at 5.5% interest at $650,000 down. That is assuming the buyer has got the qualifying to be able to go up. So, but now let's just say this is your son, and your son could actually, they can qualify for 800,000. The bank says you can get 800,000. And when they do the payment at 5.5% at 800,000, the payment is $4,542. So the buyer who's been very conservative and, you know, they're watching their budget and they're making sure they're saving money, goes, holy cow, 45.42 versus 36.90. 36.90 makes so much more sense. I got to go out. I got to go to the movies. I got to live my life. We go out shopping. We go out to dinners. Yeah, that's a big number. But here's what I then tell them. I said, okay, I totally get that. But let's just look at the math behind this. So the higher payment, if you went ahead and got a payment at $800,000 loan, the difference between those two payments is $852 a month. If you were paying that difference every single month, you'd pay $10,224. So here's what I tell them to do. I said, think about this. Instead of putting $350,000 down and having it locked up into your house because you're just worried about that, why not just do it with $800,000 down? The bank says you can afford it. More than likely, you can probably afford it. You're just kind of a little bit scared about having to do that. But take that $150,000, that's the difference, that you're not going to put it in a separate account. Put it in a separate bank account, because you are so structured, you, as opposed to some other people, could probably put this money in that account and actually not use it. And then every single month, when that mortgage payment comes in, if you can't pay $45.42 because somehow you're stretched and you don't think you can afford, take $852 out of that $150,000 account any month. And so that money's right there. You can just take it. But if you did it that way, you could be pulling that $852 out of that account for 14 years before you ever run out of that money that you set aside for the difference. And in the meantime, you're probably going to get used to the 45.42. Your incomes generally go up. You adjust your tax withholdings, and you suddenly see that you can actually do it. And any given time, you could probably just go ahead and refi, pay down your loan if you really don't like it. But what happens to people, they get in trouble. And when you ever hear about people that lose their homes, when they sell or not even lose their homes, when they lose money because the market went down or whatever, it's because they're selling at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. It's not because they lost money. It's just because they're selling at the wrong time. And why do they sell at the wrong time? Because something happened and they didn't have as much money in reserves to take care of those things. You could have an accident. You could be laid out of work. You could be on disability. You could have lost your job completely, and you only need some months. Well, you have $150,000 extra in the bank. That's actually 3 years, 40 years of mortgage payment. That gives you the confidence. You can keep making your payment, but now you can go ahead and figure out how you're going to take the next step, and you're not forced into selling because you don't have as much money saved up.
Interesting. No, it's a very mature, obviously very experienced way of thinking about it. Cause I look at those things, I get it. I'm following along. I totally agree with your analysis. A lot of it is the fear of like, well, I'm only paying, $2,500 in rent, but I've been putting away $2,000 a month, and I'm used to that. And I like that. And if I take that $2,000 and put it into a mortgage payment, oh my gosh, I don't have any savings anymore. That's part of, I think, of kind of the thinking. I don't know, I'm just making up numbers again too. The other thing that I take into consideration as well, Ken, is what happens to your tax return when you get a mortgage and there's mortgage payments, mortgage interest, because what happens with that and where's the net? Because I try to look at net, like really what is your spendable cash? Because you have property taxes, you have insurance, you have principal and interest, and you start looking at that. Wait a minute, if I fit that on my tax return and I put in my property taxes, I can deduct my interest, and then my charitable contributions that weren't deductible previously are, because now I'm itemizing, and it starts to look like the net difference isn't $1,000 more than my rent. It's $1,000 minus the tax consequences or tax benefits plus it. So you end up realizing it's just not that much more than you think. But without ever having a mortgage, without ever having that much of a loan to service and without having the interest and now the more sophisticated tax return, we're just not used to that. You know, it's kind of like
Completely.
people that, you know, they're used to having an old car and then they can fix it whenever they want. And if it breaks down, you can go, oh crap, I'm just going to walk for a couple of months and then I'll fix it when I want. But then they go get a car payment. So, oh my gosh, I have a car payment every single month. I go, but you won't have any repairs, but I have more insurance. Yes, you do have more insurance. What's the difference? The comfort level, the security level. You can drive, you know, 1,000 miles and you know it's not going to blow up on you. And you start to go, oh, wow, I really do like this better. And I understand my money is going in different places.
Well, on the other side, Gary, you can take this and going back to the leverage concept, it's how you, let's say you take a step back and look at it away from your principal residence. And this is, you're going to have housing expense no matter where you are, whether it's rent or whatever. Now you've made the decision to buy. So when you've made that decision to buy, then ultimately you want to look at what is my investment doing also, correct? Yeah. So if you're putting $200,000 down and in 3 years, your property has gone up to $1.1 million. I'm just picking a number again.
Yes.
That's
Leverage.
$100,000. Yeah. That's $100,000 gain on a $200,000 investment. Rounding up numbers, you just made a 50% return on your investment and at the same time took care of your housing needs. If you had put $350,000 down, it's still just going up to $1.1 million in 3 years. That part is not going to change. But now you made $100,000 on a $350,000 investment, and your rate of return has dramatically reduced. It is if you did just 10% down, let's just say you kept even more money and you did a 90% loan, your interest rate would have probably gone up from a 20%, but that's okay. Most of that is write-offable in your taxes. And then you look at it in 3 years and the property has gone up to $1.1 million. You just made 100% return on your $100,000 investment because that's what you were making because you're still paying for your housing. And at the same time, you have all this extra cash that you can keep in the bank if you are just, you know, very, very conservative, or you can deploy that money in other ways to help you make you money. It's a full look. It's a full look at how you want to deploy. I always believe in having a lot of cash reserves so that you can withstand any kind of rocking the boat with, you know, with your job, with your health, whatever. But after that, there's going to be disposable income that makes a lot of sense. And of course, you know, my first thing is that's where we want to go and put into multi-units and rental property.
Exactly.
So it's about a rate of return and using your ability to own or occupy a property to get the better rates up front so that you can keep building your wealth as you get older and as you progress through life.
That's good stuff, Ken Pecus. This is really good stuff. You guys to find out, you know, as you can see, Ken can do this like with your individual situation to kind of figure out, yeah, the mortgage company says, sure, you can afford that. They don't want your house. They want to make sure that you can stay in it. But then you psychologically, you know, you can see with Ken, it's more math. Let's figure out how this works out, dealing with the tax issues and tax consequences. He's good at this stuff. 619-977-8419. That's Ken Pecus, the Pecus Group at eXp Realty. Okay, Ken, next question I have. Let's go back to almost like size of house. I want to explore that a little bit, like with size of house. So let's say, because, you know, we're talking about $1 million house because it's a San Diego thing, right? Now, what about the numbers that you're doing here? Let's say that you go to get a loan and the lender says, well, yeah, you know, if you do a 15% mortgage, we'll give you a 15-year mortgage, we will give you a 5.5% loan. But if you get okay, if you want a 30-year mortgage, we can do that. But however, we're looking at, this is your first home, not a lot of credit history. And so you're going to have a 6.5% rate at 30. But if you do a 20, I'll give you 6. And if you do a 15, I'll give you 5.5. And those numbers start to look at, well, wait a minute, a 30-year loan at 6.5%, then here's the total outlay. And I think those are some of the other numbers that go through what I've been hearing of new buyers' heads, where the lender is kind of saying, well, it's like 1% lower if you do a 15-year loan, but then you got the payment higher. There's less interest, which is fine. But now, so I kind of wanted you to address that if you could, on the fact that sometimes the lender is going to say higher rate, 30-year loan, 15-year loan,
Sure.
lower rate, because those are the kind of things. Now, I want to ask you though, because we really only have about a minute. Is there any way that you can stay on a little bit longer?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Happy to.
Okay. So what I want to do is I want to keep you through the bottom of the hour break. I also want to make it available to you guys. If you have questions specifically, give us a call at 888-344-1170. We're talking with Ken Pecus, the founder of the Pecus Group at eXp Realty. And we're talking specifically about home buying and leverage. It's a concept that gets a little tricky for people. Some people, it's a concept. Well, what is leverage? Isn't that where how does that work? So we're talking about leverage specifically. And with real estate, leverage is huge. Understanding that leverage concept, we're going to be going into that a little bit more with Ken Pecus. His personal number is 619-977-8419. And if you want to get a hold of me, as you know, it's 855-500-TRUST. What I do with the houses that Ken helps people buy is I put them in your trust so that it can be passed down to your heirs. After all this hard work of putting it together, you want to make sure that it is distributable or pass alongable to your heirs. And that is my job at 855-500-TRUST. Okay. So coming up next, right here on the Word on Wealth, we've got Ken Pecus. I've convinced him to kind of stay through the break, and we're going to be talking again a little bit more about the concept of leverage, because I think it's really critical to get this, and we'll be right back.
You don't need to know everything. You just need to know where to find answers you can trust when you need them. Welcome to the Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush. We're here to help you build, protect, and transfer everything you've worked hard for with expert estate planning, trust administration, inheritance, and probate. Call Gary and the team at gqlaw.com. 855-500-TRUST. You're not alone. Ask for the legal help you need. Call Gary and the team at GQ Law, 855-500-TRUST, or go online and download Gary's free ebooks and videos. Read Gary's blogs. Call or click to request your free consultation or to talk with a member of the GQ team. That's gqlaw.com, 855.
You're live.
Welcome to Word on Wealth. You're here with Gary Quackenbush and Ken Pecus. Ken, we're doing it. I really appreciate you spending the time to do this, because I think the concept of leverage with real property, if you're a new home buyer, first-time home buyer, somebody like spending more money than you've ever imagined you'd have to pay on housing. I get that. I think anybody that's owned a home, I don't care how much you pay, it's like you're like in shock, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? Is this really going to happen? And then, all these terms that I kind of like go, oh gosh, whatever people say, oh, I'm house poor. I'm house poor. I'm house poor. I have no cash. I'm house poor. I go, well, that's such a negative connotation. You're not house poor. You have an incredible house. You live in this home. With my daughter, it's funny talking to her. She goes, everything I do is mine now. I whack the weeds and it's my yard, and I trim my hedges, and I fix my ceiling, and I clean my carpet. And it's like this whole, like this new concept. Her and her husband are super good housekeepers, and whoever they rented from, the people, they moved out, and the landlord's like, whoa, I guess we should pay you, And so now she's got her own home, and she goes, it's just so different. It's like, it's ours. And if I wreck something, oh, well, it's mine. So it's pretty cool. So home ownership it's cool. But let's keep going on, if you don't mind. So we got Ken Pecus, and let's talk about the leverage concept a little bit more. But what I wanted to talk about is the mortgages, because you get lenders, everybody has a different perspective. And that's why I appreciate yours as the buyer seller agent. The lenders, sometimes they'll say, well, 30-year mortgage, I'm going to have to give you a longer loan just because, or a higher rate because of the way things look, but if you did a shorter loan, it's less interest. If you do a halfway between, then, so talk about that a little, about these long loans, short loans, interest, higher, lower, all that.
Sure. Okay. So I think it's really important to just, once again, you always have to figure out what is your goal. So the first thing I tell people when they're asking me similar questions that you're asking is I'll say, okay, a lot of people. Gary, I'm going to pretend you're my client. Okay.
Got it.
Gary, a lot of people that own property, right?
Yes.
Out of all the people that that own property, when you bought your first property, how many of them still have that same property today?
None of them.
None of them have them, because one of the things that happens is that people when they buy their first property, their mental mindset is that this is my forever property. But the reality is that forever property takes a turn usually at about year 4, 5, 6, or 7, and things happen. There's expanded families, there's relocations, I just don't like the neighborhood, there's new schools, all sorts of things happen. There's bigger jobs, there's lesser jobs. Things happen that they have to end up moving. So when we have these 30-year loans or 15-year or 20-year loans, they're amortized for people that may actually stay in the property all that time, but the vast majority of us don't. So if you're going to stay in a property forever, maybe some of these things make sense. But more than likely, you're going to be out of that property within anywhere between 5 and 10 years. It just kind of depends. People like to say it's 7 years. Some people have been holding on to it that it's 10 years now. But even if you hold on to the property for 10 years, most people refinance somewhere along the line because the interest rates took a dip or they needed to add on to their house. So they don't actually keep that loan very long. They might even keep the property, but they don't keep that first original loan.
Okay.
So one of the things I try to get them to first realize is that don't think of this loan and whatever you're going to do as your end all. Using that other example where you had an $800,000 loan, if an interest rate is 6.5% versus 5.5% versus 5%, whatever, it's true that the interest rate is going to be lower as you get the shorter loans. But the one thing you have to remember, the payment is going to be dramatically more expensive because you're amortizing it on a much shorter time period.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go from a 30-year loan to a 15-year loan, and let's just say you have a much lower interest rate, let's just say it's lower by a full 1% or 1.5%. You're right, you're paying 1.5% less. However, your actual monthly payment is going to be dramatically bigger. So it's going to go from, potentially $5,000 and it could be $7,900. So that's number one. You're like, if you're going to pay it off in 15 years, you have to be prepared for a much higher payment. It won't be double your payment, but it'll be much higher. So people might come back and say, but I am. I'm going to pay it off that much faster. That's what I want to do. So I want to be on that payment. And to them, I say, but you might want to consider a different viewpoint. Once again, it's always about protecting the what ifs in life. If you want to pay it off in 15 years or 20 years, take the higher 30-year amortization. The interest rate itself is not going to be that much higher. The payment on a 30-year amortization versus a 15-year amortization, it's going to, in terms of interest rate payments, it's going to be simply a few $100 each month in difference in how they amortize it. But what you can do is you can do principal pay downs. And so if you're going to pay $7,500 a month versus $5,000 a month because you want that shorter 15-year, take the 30-year thing and then pay $2,500 a month in principal pay downs. And what happens is your loan will dramatically drop much faster because you're doing principal pay downs right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole key in doing all of that is if something happens, one of those what ifs where you're out of work or you have to do whatever, or something goes wrong, things that you can't plan on, your minimum payment to keep you current is much lower. And whether that was a pandemic that hit, whether that was people going on to certain waivers of their employment for 6 months or whatever, you have a much lower threshold to stay current and not be ever forced to make a bad decision of selling at the wrong time. So it makes way more sense, in my opinion, to take the 30-year loans. Even if you want to pay it off in 15, just pay the extra principal pay downs. And any competent real estate agent or mortgage broker can actually give you an amortization schedule that will tell you how much to pay. Or if you're like me on my rental properties, my lender right now actually, every time I make a payment, says, do you want to make extra principal payments? And they have a little chart that says if you make $200 or $400 or whatever extra principal, it says you just cut off 6.7 years of payments. It's the coolest thing.
Huh.
And the lender gives it to you.
Okay. And so some of this, the concept they're talking about is a lot of it depends on your own fiscal responsibility. The person that actually can handle the money, can manage the money. And I think that's really kind of indicative of, you get a lender that says you can afford this much because of your income. And then you look at your own budget. And I think the people that are looking at those budgets are the ones that actually could manage it. Because,
Correct.
I like how you're thinking on a lot of this is, keep the control in your court. Don't hand it all to the lender. Don't have it so that the institution has all the decision and control, which means they have all of your money and income. Instead, keep some for yourself and you can maintain and manage. So I think these are great concepts. And I really appreciate Ken Pecus. One of the other, I think, considerations is that there's still a kind of a mindset where 6.5 sounds really, really high to people. But I try to explain to even my own kids, I said, 6.5 is not high. My first home, I had to get a first and a second and a down payment. And so my first mortgage was 8. My second was over 10. But my second was due in 7. I had to do a 30 due in 7, all this creative financing and put as much money as I could down, all this stuff. And then I ended up paying the one off and refinance. But it was, a 5.5%, 6.5% loans are just, to me, I've lived during the time when mortgage rates were at one point, they're over 18%. So, and house prices.
You're old. You guys didn't have to spend as much money as we do today. Don't you understand that, Dad?
I know.
No, we're different today. And that's what you have to break through.
I know. And the car I was driving was worth $1,100 and it broke down every week. But it's like, no, I know. You're right. It's the concept. But I really think, and this is what I was hoping you would say, and I'm glad that, unrehearsed, we agree on all this. It's really, it's math, and it's intelligent financial decisions on here are your options available. You guys, Ken Pecus has the options. He does this for a living. He's done it for many years. He understands this stuff. Don't go to anybody else if you're going to buy or sell a home. It's 619-977-8419. And I'm saying that from a really good position. It's not like Ken tracked me down and said, hey, I want to run commercials on your show. It's like Ken has personally helped me with real property sales and purchase. He's helped my family members with a lot of real property, and he's excellent. He's done a really good job for us. 619-977-8419. The concept of leverage. Ken, I just really appreciate you being on the show and staying this extra time. I hope you have a great rest of your day and your week, and we'll be talking again next Wednesday, man. I appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks, Ken.
I appreciate you, Gary. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. All right, guys, we'll be back in just a sec with me. I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up here on the Word on Wealth in a couple minutes.
You've got questions. We've got answers. This is the Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush of GQ Law. Gary's here to give you peace of mind with expert estate planning, trust administration, inheritance, and probate. Call Gary to build, protect, and transfer your wealth. 855-500-TRUST. GQlaw.com.
So Gary, we've talked a long time about estate administration. So what is that? And why is it important?
Estate administration is the distribution part of estate planning. So when someone passes away and they leave money to beneficiaries, the property has to be administered. So it's like taking it from the decedent to the survivor. That's called the estate administration process. So usually you're going to have a successor trustee that's named in the trust. They'll have no idea what they're doing because they've never done it before. So then they call on GQ Law and we walk them step by step on how to be a successful and good successor trustee. We also do the required notifications. We notify the Department of Health Services and all the legal requirements so that they can have the estate administration done properly. We help successor trustees be successful.
Call or click to request your free consultation. GQlaw.com. 855-500-TRUST. GQlaw.com.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael Horn asking, do you
Consultation or to talk with a member of the team, call Gary at 855-500-TRUST. GQ Law.
You're live.
Back on here, we are Gary Quackenbush with the Word on Wealth. We had a great session with Ken Pecus. I told you, Wednesday's the day we get smarter. Real estate in San Diego, it's part of our soul. It just happens. I remember, so I had this every year in an organization I belong to, California Society of Tax Consultants. I've been their president. Like right now, I'm the immediate past president, but I've been president of their organization statewide and in San Diego chapter. And I've done speaking engagements all over the place in California, talking about estate planning and, how real estate fits together with estate planning. And it's always a lot of fun. And then when I found Ken, to help out with this, he just knows his stuff, and I really enjoy the fact that he knows so much about real property and real estate and anything in San Diego. Well, I always digress and talk about Ken. Okay, specifically though, we had a speaker, and it was a dinner meeting speaker for tax education for tax professionals, and we had the county assessor come, and he would come every year to a dinner meeting and talk to us about the real estate market in San Diego. And it was a time, this was years ago, when real estate was starting to get expensive. The rates were going up, and people were saying, There's a bubble. There's a bubble. It's going to happen. The bubble's going to pop. And I remember him saying that was one of the things he wanted to talk about. So everybody's kind of waiting with bated breath. And he says, let's talk about the real estate bubble. He says, is there a bubble in real estate in San Diego? And he said, let's think about that. It is January. And there's somebody in New York on watching television, and he's watching the Torrey Pines Classic, which is in this beautiful golf course, beautiful lush greens, overlooking the ocean, the Pacific Ocean with the waves crashing, and there's sunshine on the golfer's back. And he said, and you're in New York and it's below zero and it's been snowing for 3 months and it's going to snow for another 2 months and you're freezing. He said, there's no real estate bubble. There just isn't. He said, the reason the values in San Diego are what they are is because it's San Diego. And he was right. I mean, that was a prediction years ago. I know with my dad got into real estate about 60 years ago, started buying real estate in San Diego, just didn't have any money and just really struggled and co-ownerships and buying one property to another and just, family maintenance on property. We literally, that's what we did on weekends. We would go and maintain these 3 1-bedroom houses, and they were ancient, and I would crawl under them. At 8 years old, I was doing, I was sweating copper joints as on copper piping under the floor because my dad couldn't fit. He was an adult. I was this kid, and I could scoot under the floor and I could solder some things together, and I could do some maintenance. We re-roofed them, we recarpeted, we did all these things. And it was this huge sacrifice. But later on, that led to him being able to buy with multiple partners in an office building. And then he bought out his partners, and then he traded his 3 little houses that he bought when he was 25 years old. He traded those for a different property, and he just kept doing this real estate thing. And by the time he passed away, he had quite a real estate empire. And it was slow and steady, and there wasn't any big gains. It wasn't like, we were driving, motorhomes all over the place and big fancy yachts and all that. No, it just, he used that to supplement his income. And as he got older, he used that as his hedge. So if you look at an investment portfolio where you have, how much can you risk? We talk about that with Anthony Wright tomorrow on the show, but how much can you risk? What's your risk tolerance? And his risk tolerance, even as an old guy, was really high because his real estate was his stability. So he didn't need to be in like super conservative investments, because even if he lost all of his invested money, he still had his real estate. So, San Diego real estate is that's just the way it is. And you could, ask Ken when he's on our show again next Wednesday, ask him, if that's the way it is. Ken's been selling real estate in San Diego for a really long time, about 20 years. So he knows this stuff. Okay, on real estate. Now, as far as from an estate planning perspective, one thing about real estate is you do buy your homes. Let's say you bought a little home and then you bought a bigger home, and you keep kind of buying and moving, taking the equity from one property and putting it into another and moving up. And what's happening with that property is it's gaining in value, and yet your purchase basis, the amount of money you actually put in, like cash in to start out, it stays pretty low. So if you have a house for a long time and you go and sell it, there's capital gains taxes. Okay. Let's say, for example, you bought, and this is not uncommon. I deal with people like this. I mean, their parents bought a house for $15,000 and they held on to it for 30 years or 40 years. And now it's worth literally, $1.5 million. Well, it went from $150,000 to $1.5 million. It went up 10 times over 30 or 40 years. Do the math. That's good money. Could you have made more in the stock market? Sure, if it cooperated. But what happens now is if they try to sell that home, it's their home and they can get a capital gains exclusion. So basically the first $500,000 of equity, they can exclude. The rest of it, they have to pay tax on. So they bought the house for $15,000 and now it's worth $1.5 million. They have $1 million of gain. They have to pay taxes on $1 million if they sold it. Okay. If they were able to hold on to that house longer, maybe by, buying a replacement house, maybe even a smaller one, and, you can work the tax consequences with that. But by selling that house before they die, they'd have to pay the capital gains tax on $1 million. That's not uncommon to hear stuff like that. The day after they pass away, if the property were sold, the capital gains tax would be 0. You heard that right. The day after they passed away, if the property was sold the day after, the property capital gains tax would be 0, because at death, all purchase basis, all, property tax, not property tax basis, but purchase basis of property goes up to fair market value. It gets reset. We call it a new basis. So even if they bought the property for $15,000 and now it's worth $1.5 million, the basis was $15,000, and now after death, the basis is $1.5 million. So there's no gain. You sell the property the day after, a year after, and you're only paying on the gain post-death. Okay. Real property taxes, a different story. Your mom and dad paid property taxes on their $15,000 property, and it went up, 2% per year under Prop 13. So over 40 years, it's gone up, but it went up from, paying it on $15,000 to now it's gone up, 2% per year over all these years. It's going to be higher. It may be based on a $30,000 property now, but it's going to be a lot less than it would be if you just if you purchased the property. In fact, on the day they pass away, if the property goes to anybody other than a child, and that child makes it their primary residence, if that doesn't happen, then the property taxes will increase to fair market value. Okay, so if the kids decided to keep the house and they wanted to keep it for a rental, that's not principal residence. That means the rental property is going to have a property tax basis of $1.5 million. So the property taxes are going to go up to that equivalent. They're going to go up to $15,000 to $16,000, $17,000 a year, as opposed to mom paying, $2,000 a year. And that's not horrible. It's not the end of the world. It's not illegal. It may be upsetting, but it's math. That's the bottom line. Property taxes were paid based on this really old, the Prop 13 assessment. It kept it down when mom and dad needed to live in that house, and now it's going to go up. It's just math. It is what it is. How do you get around it? You can't. It is what it is. So we just deal with it. We deal with the math. And I have people that say, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. I can't believe it. Well, do the math. Does it work out? Are you going to make a net profit and realizing it's going to go up in value? Okay, remember, when your dad and mom's house at $15,000, if it went up 10% in 1 year, that means the next year it was worth $1,500 more, right? If it went up 5%, it was only worth, $7,500 more. I'm sorry. Yeah, $15,000 house would be worth $750 more. But now, if you have a $1.5 million property and it goes up 10%, that's $150,000 gain in 1 year. If it's 5%, then it's a $75,000 gain in 1 year. So you're looking at leverage and numbers that are bigger. So you have to factor that in. Over the long term, real property in California in San Diego especially, it goes up. Over the long haul, it goes up a lot. And you just kind of calculate that in. So a lot of it is math. A lot of it is your comfort with those numbers. And that's, regardless of all of that, you need to put it in a trust, because when you pass away, if your house is not in a trust, it's going to go to your kids, because that's what the law does, but it's going to go through probate, and you're going to lose about 10%. In other words, it's going to cost the estate, technically your kids, then I guess, it's going to cost them about 10% to transfer that property from you to them. Well, if your house is worth $1.5 million when you die, that's about $100,000 to $150,000 in costs. It's insane what probate costs. It's crazy. If it's in a trust, you don't have the cost of probate. You don't have to go through probate. You don't have the 1.5 to 2 year delay in transferring that property. Instead, you have trust administration, and you're going to spend much less than that. Somewhere around an eighth to a tenth of whatever it costs to do a probate is what it costs to do trust administration. And it's faster, and it's more satisfying, and it can be done, more smoothly. It's not perfect, but that's the kind of stuff that we do. Call me, 855-500-TRUST. Let me help you out with this stuff. Let me make sure you're getting stuff right. If you have family disputes during the distribution process, because something's not being done with the trust, you need to get legal help on that stuff. Don't mess with it, because it's a lot of money. It's everything that your parents had, no matter how much it is, a little or a lot. It's everything they had. Let's get it right. Get a distributed property according to mom and dad's, wishes, according to the law. 855-500-TRUST. All right. Tomorrow, we got Anthony Wright talking about money and finances and answering questions for us. Thank you for listening to Word on Wealth today with me and Ken Pecus. You can pick us up on the Word on Wealth on the YouTube also, and our blog and our podcast. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Tell a friend about the Word on Wealth, featured since 1995, with financial solutions attorney Gary Quackenbush, an expert in estate planning, wills and trusts, and tax problem solving. Gary is past president of the California Society of Tax Consultants. Reach out to us. The Word on Wealth team of financial experts is here to answer your questions and help preserve your family's financial future.
The information you hear on the Word on Wealth is for general information purposes only. This program discusses general financial and legal topics. Seek legal advice from a competent lawyer for your individual legal needs. The opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the views of Salem Media Group or its sponsors. The Word on Wealth with Gary Quackenbush is sponsored by the Word on Wealth Radio Network.
The airing of this program